Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Welcome into this week's Ask Mike. Alyssa Orange alongside Mike Irwin. Excited to answer a big batch of questions. Got a lot to talk about as we get ready for some baseball postseason. You look excited. You excited today?
It's a controversial week, right?
Okay, it is. It definitely is. Let's jump into it. Our first question is from Hog Redneck, who wants to know, did DVH screw up by taking Zach Morris out after the 7th in Game 2 against Vanderbilt? The kid had pitched 3 innings of no-hit baseball in relief of Tiger. What happened next was a disaster, with the Commodores scoring 8 runs off Adcock, Wood, and Coyle. Cost the Hogs an outright SEC title.
You know, I don't know how you could expect him to anticipate what was going to happen. First of all, let's talk about Zach Morris. Here's a guy that has been pitching incredible. If you go back, he goes 3 innings in this game, doesn't give up a hit. The weekend before, he didn't give up a hit. He went 3 innings. The weekend before that, he went, I think, 2 innings and didn't give a hit. This is a guy that they're really counting on now in postseason. You don't want to push him beyond that limit. He's a relief pitcher. He's not a starter. So if he's been going 3 innings and pitching no-hit baseball, and you got a guy in front of you that can go 3 innings and has been doing this for a month and has been solid, why wouldn't you go to him? So to say he screwed up would be to say that he knew what was going to happen, which no one could. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Baseball coaches have to make decisions like that all the time, and they do take into consideration the past history of certain pitchers. So again, Morris had been going 3 innings, 2 innings, he had been going 4 and 5 innings. So I think that's why the change was made, and the mistake was not in making that change. I don't know that it's a mistake, but what happened was I think the pressure got to Wood.
Yeah. Again, he's just a freshman, and he has been in some stellar moments. But you also have to remember, sometimes it's just baseball.
It is.
And that happens when momentum, and you can't get it back. And then obviously it followed them into Game 3. And, you know, sometimes you just can't win.
And you're not taking the other team into consideration. Vanderbilt had been on a 4-game losing streak. They're upset. You know, they're too good to keep losing games like this. And they bounced back at home.
Yeah, and you never know. You don't take out Zach Morris, and something else happens, and now it's all Zach Morris's fault.
Yeah.
So you could go either way there.
Sure.
Next question. S. Giles continues with more second guessing. The question, what do you think about Van Horn admitting once he knew Arkansas had earned a share of the SEC championship, he played it safe and took Will McIntyre out of Saturday's game after the 5th inning? Do you play it safe when you have a chance to win the title outright?
Again, I think you play it safe when you look at what your guy is doing. You know that you've already got a share of a title. So you're going to get greedy and say, no, that's not good enough. We want an outright title. I'll go ahead and push McIntyre some more innings. He already was up over 80 pitches on the weekend. Also, here's a guy that they've now concluded, and this is huge going into postseason. They've now concluded that he has the ability to pitch in 2 games on the weekend. That's like a Kevin Kopps type situation. He may not be the closer, but he's kind of a middle inning guy that can come in and bail you out and burn up some innings, and he can do it on 2 different weekends if he has to. So you're not going to push him 90 pitches, 100 pitches, and risk a problem when something much more important than whether you've got a conference title or an outright title or a shared title or an outright title, as opposed to what happens in a regional and a super regional. So again, I think he's always making these decisions at this time of the year with the postseason in mind, which we know in baseball is more important than the regular season.
You know, I laugh because we've been around this for a long time. And this is so typical sometimes of Arkansas fans, and we think in the moment. But then what happens in Omaha if your pitching gets exhausted and it's, oh, we pushed them too hard during the regular season. Now they're tired and their arms hurt. And guys, we got bigger fish to fry, right? Coming up next, for sure. All right, Mousetown says, a buddy is trying to convince me that Friday's 8-inning meltdown in Nashville was just like the dropped foul ball in Omaha. Whew. In 2018, and Van Horn is jinxed. I say that's stupid. What do you say?
Well, I think it's an overreaction for sure.
Yeah.
Because one is not the same as the other. Arkansas has won quite a few baseball championships, going back to Southwest Conference championships. They haven't ever won a national championship. So for a program that has been this good, going all the way back to the late 70s, that's how far back it stretches, of success, almost year in and year out, to do it that long and never have won a national title, I still find that amazing. That they haven't, because they could have and should have, and that you were one dropped foul ball I would say 90% of the time, 95% of the time, somebody makes that catch. That's just one of those crazy things where three guys get around each other and looks like the Keystone Cops. I'm an old guy. Most people don't remember them. But they're running around and they just, and the ball drops. To have it happen with a national championship on the line and he ended up costing you, that was, one is annoying. What happened in the Vanderbilt game was annoying. That is heartbreaking. Yeah. So it's not the same thing. Is Dave Van Horn jinxed? Now that's stupid.
Yeah. Talking about it just makes my hands sweat. Gosh, being there and seeing that, everybody PTSD. Oh man, you were outside. Yeah. Had no idea what was going on.
I didn't know. I had to come back and
I was in the stands with my hands were shaking. I didn't know what was going on. So totally different things. All right, Armand Abbey says, I keep hearing that the SEC tournament is no big deal. That's dumb. I don't need to win it, but they need to get some issues straightened out this week. Am I right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Dave Van Horn talked about what those issues were. The number one thing is he's got to get his freshman pitching going again, including Christian Fouch, a guy we haven't talked about in a while. He keeps insisting this guy's got really good stuff. If we could get him going before postseason, that's one more arm that you'll have, and you need those arms. Then you gotta kind of, I would use the SEC tournament to get Gage Wood back going again. I want to put him out there and let him get his confidence back, because you don't want him going into the regional going, oh boy, that Vanderbilt. So you use the SEC tournament, you pitch him and let him get some innings and get his confidence back. You do the same thing with Ben Bybee, who hasn't pitched in a while. I think you put Adcock back out there, because he had that one bad inning, even though he came back on the Saturday game and pitched well. You want him to pitch. What you don't want to do is use Hagen Smith a lot. You don't want to use Tigert a lot. I don't even know if Hunter Holland's going to pitch. They might not pitch him. So what you're doing is you're using your proven starters a little bit, but you're using the other guys a lot, because you want to develop them. Now, that's on the mound. Now, what about the plate? Okay, he specifically said we got to get Borfin hitting the baseball again. They need to do that.
Yep.
We got to get Kendall Diggs hitting the baseball again. So you're making sure they're in the lineup. You're not pulling them out. You want them to hit to get back on track. But then you've also got Peyton Holt, who's been hitting in the 7th hole. He said, I might move him up to the 3 hole. That might fire some other people up, but you get him higher up in the lineup in the middle of that position where you get something going. So there's a change that you could see that could be made. And then Ben McLaughlin. This is a guy that when Jared Wagner came back, he kind of got pushed out. Okay, we did see him come in and pinch hit. He said he not only might pinch hit in the SEC tournament, depending on who we find out the pitcher is, we may put him in the lineup for a specific game. Take somebody out, put him in. So these are things you would do. And then what about Wagner? This is a guy that sat out for what, over a month? So he comes back. You're thinking, I wonder how long it's going to take him to get back going again. Well, he almost hit a home run in Game 3. So he's getting there. But Dave Van Horn said, his hand's been sore, because he had the fracture there, and he's getting over that. But it's not as bad as it was. He said, we may not just have him do a lot of batting practice stuff, kind of cut back on that. But we do want him to hit, because we want him in those situations.
Yeah.
So all of those things, and then he said, because a lot of people are saying they don't need to win the tournament, they're not even going to try to win the tournament. He said, we're going to try to win every game. But he said, we're going to do it by making some really strange decisions that we wouldn't ordinarily make in the regular season. So the translation is, if we make all these changes and we happen to win it, that's fine. But if we don't, we're not going to be upset about it.
This is fascinating, because I'm in the SEC tournament is not a big deal crowd. And now I just sit there, listen to your argument. And I think what I've now thought, because I still don't think it's a big deal, that maybe it's a year-to-year basis. If this was 2021, not a big deal.
You don't
Though they
need-
won it in 2021.
But didn't need to.
Didn't need to. And it almost affected them a little bit because they played and they won it and then they got kicked out in the Supers, a very hot NC State team. But this is a team where you're saying, you're making really interesting moves to set you up for success down the road. So could it be a year-to-year basis depending on the team kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And this year it's important. Not important to win it, but important to get all those things done that I just talked about that Dave Van Horn talked about. I didn't just talk about it
All right.
myself. I heard him say that.
Okay, you've done a little bit of convincing on me. I still think it's not a big deal. All right, Thomas H. Hobbs wants to know, are you as worried about Gage Wood as I am? He was rolling before the Vandy series, but DVH says his velo was down and he had control problems. I'm spooked by all these injuries.
Well, first of all, he's not an injury. He's not injured. Now, the question that was asked of DVH after the game was, has he been overused? Has he run into a wall? Because in high school, you don't throw as much, so maybe the toll of the season is starting to get to him. And he said, actually, we've used him less lately. I went back and looked. He just threw 34 pitches in those two games against Vandy, 59 against South Carolina, 58 against Mississippi State, 39 against A&M, 52 against Georgia, 60 against Tennessee. That's not an inordinate number of pitches. You know, he's not going 70 or 80 in any of these games. It's hard to say what causes somebody to end up with arm fatigue, but I accept what Dave Van Horn said. And what he ended up saying was it was nerves, in his opinion. Now, I'm sitting here watching this, and what I told anybody that was listening, and a lot of times people don't listen to me when I'm watching a game because I say a lot of stuff, but I said, look, he knows that an outright SEC championship is on the line and it's his to close it out. When he came out in that Saturday game, because he was the first one out of the he was the one that replaced Zach Morris. He knows if he goes those final 3 innings, they win the championship with him closing it out. And I think it got to him. I think you could see from the first batter it did. And so then he comes back the next day, and I think it's in his head a little bit because he can still do the same thing. But this time he inherits some issues. There's some people on base, and it just got away from him. So I think it was a case of nerves. I think if you're Matt Hobbs, if you're Dave Van Horn, you sit him down, you say, look, this happens. You're a freshman. Okay, get over it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what they do. It's a funny Gage Wood story that DVH shared during the Swatters Club. He said at that TCU game at the beginning of the year, and they got blown out by TCU, he said he went to go get Gage Wood, very first appearance on the mound as a freshman. He said he was ghost white. And he said, son, you're going to learn from this, but right now I'm going to need you to get in the dugout. He was just, a statue.
Right.
And we have seen him come so far from that moment. We forget he's a freshman. And you got to remind yourself sometimes like that. And we saw it with Hagen Smith a season ago where you saw Hagen get tired and worn out. We saw it in Stillwater in the regionals. So I think it has to do with his age, and I think he's going to be fine.
I think the emotions play on you too more when you're a freshman.
He's an
depends
emotional kid.
Depends on who you are, but he is emotional. And after he got pulled on in that Friday game, they had a close-up of him in the dugout that lasted quite a while, and he was crying. Now, I don't think he's going to be doing that next year or the year after. I think it toughens you up, but you have to go through it.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely. All right, next question. Van Horn Fan on YouTube says, I know you don't like those dugout interviews with players and coaches during SEC baseball. I hate that stuff, but a lot of people like it. What are they, idiots?
Okay, I tell you what they are. They are like my wife. My wife will sit and watch TV while reading a book while checking her cell phone messages. 3 things at once. There are people that do that. Multitasking is what they call it. Well, multitasking is fine in some situations. It's stupid in a baseball game. I don't want it. I hate it. I want to focus on the action. A guy, we were talking about this last week on Ask Mike, and a guy said, what, you have a problem? You can't tell what's going on. You can see on the screen, and then you can listen, and you can still tell what's happening. It's annoying. It gets on my nerves. It reminds me of when I'm watching a game and somebody comes in and starts going yak, 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 yak. I don't want to hear the yak, yak. I want to watch the game. And there's a little part of me that believes the yak, yak, yak is a jinx. because it seemed like every time somebody's yak, and here's a problem. All of a sudden you give up a home run. The other thing is, isn't it rude to even the players, but especially the coaches? You know, they don't want to be sitting there talking to a couple of yo-yos in the press box when the game is going on. Can you imagine guys in the booth, in the press box, talking to Nick Saban while a football game is going on? He'd beat them up. He'd send somebody to get him when the thing, don't ever do that again, I'll wipe you out. Okay, come on. I mean, if you would never do it to a football coach, what are you doing it to a baseball coach? Has ESPN decided that baseball is a sport where coaches don't need to watch the game? This is an ESPN stupid thing. They started doing it, then all their ESPN3 people are doing it, and it's dumb. I hate it.
It's a filler because of the length of the game and the pace of the game. I like them to a degree. I think that we were both into we both agreed that the one with Gage Wood was way too long. And that's the problem, is when you've already gone a couple minutes and then you go, I got a couple more questions for you. And meanwhile, South Carolina scored 2 runs. And you're like, get off the TV. I think there's a balance there, and it can go really long.
If you're coming out of a break and the inning hasn't quite started yet, and you can go 30 seconds. Look, I've seen this happen before. You hold up the pitcher for maybe another 3 or 4 pitches and give them an extra 30 seconds and talk to somebody for a minute before the inning starts. But you don't let it bleed over. I just don't think you should put coaches in a position where they're having to look at a game out of one eye and talk to the camera in the other eye. And if I'm on the mound and one of my guys is over there, like Gage Wood, I'm out here pitching and Gage Wood is over there and I can see him out of the corner of my eye in front of a camera going, and I've just given up a base hit. Because if you get on camera, you got to smile. You can't sit there and look mad. So he's grinning. You just gave up a base hit, and you look over there and you see him grinning in front of a camera.
I just want to let y'all know, this is as calm as he is on this topic. You should see him watching these games in real life in this studio.
Just, again,
a lot of yelling.
A lot
of anger.
I'm this way when I'm around people watching a game and they want to, at least a social setting, but we got the game on.
And then when it's just you and
they
your dog.
just yep, and I'm like, oh, shut up, I'm watching the game. I don't want to hear this chit chat.
Man, I feel
so maybe it's just me. I don't know.
I think it might be you and a handful of other people. All right, at Newman RW12 says, since everything is being restructured next year due to Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, why not give the top 6 SEC teams rated by D1 Baseball a bye for the tournament? The top teams have already secured their national seeds, then let the other 10 teams go ahead and have the SEC tournament in Hoover so they can try and improve their national seed.
Yeah, you're trying to have the best of both worlds there. You're saying that the tournament is not necessary for some teams, but it's necessary for other teams, so just let the other teams play. Here's the problem with that. First of all, the SEC office is located in Birmingham. I don't know how far it is from Hoover, but
it's about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. That's their baby. They work all year on that, and they love it. They're not going to give that up. And then what do you do if you take the top 6 teams away from that tournament? You have nobody there. Yeah. You might as well not play. I mean, you might as well go play it on a high school field with nobody there, but you won't need Hoover, right? the Hoover Met or whatever they call that thing. So it's just not going to happen. Your idea is better, just don't do it at all. I mean, really. I mean, if you're so bad that you need the tournament to somehow possibly give you a bid, then that's your problem.
Yeah. The biggest problem I have with that is you're going to have a tournament champion that's not one of the best teams in the league. And then those tournament winners, regardless of how they finish the regular season, get an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. Right. So now you're giving an automatic bid to one of your bottom teams that is taking a bid away from a better team in a different league or a better team in your own league. So
it just shouldn't happen. They're going to keep it the way it is.
I understand what he's saying, but not rational. Okay. Tim Tino. Is this Courtney?
No, but it's somebody it's a Florida fan for sure.
All right. I recently went to a Razorback baseball game. Do you happen to know why Baum-Walker is one of those only stadiums in the world without cup holders?
First of all, it's not even close to being the only stadium in the world without cup holders. That's an irrational statement. Modern stadiums, that would be, and we're talking college stadiums, not pro stadiums. So if you went around and looked at college baseball stadiums built in the last 10 years, most of them probably have cup holders because that's become a thing. When it was called Baum in those days, when Baum Stadium was built, back in the I think 96 was the first year. That was not a thing. Frank Broyles went all over the country looking at other college baseball stadiums, and he did what he always did. He would pick out the things he liked, discard the stuff he didn't like. So if he's not seeing cup holders, that's not going to be something that he asked for. What he did instead was he was trying to figure out a way to compact as many seats as possible onto that seating bowl because he wanted the noise factor. He did that in Bud Walton. Bud Walton looks like, if you walk in there, it looks the same size as Texas Tech's arena. It's very similar, or South Carolina's, A&M's arena. They're all very similar in the way they look. Arkansas's got 3,000 or 4,000 more seats in there than they do because of the way he arranged that. It's designed with everything close to create that compact sound, and it has an effect. So the problem with Baum Stadium is if you retrofit those seats with cups, here's what you're going to have. You're going to have a big cup holder sticking over on your side, and then the other guy's got one on his side, and every time you come in and out of the seat, you're going to be banging yourself on the cup holder. If you try to
put it on the back? Like in between where the seats connect?
Yes, but if people are walking to their seat, they're going to bump into it. I mean, they've looked at this, and there's just no way to the way though the aisles are smaller. Frank did all these things to compact it together, and it creates a situation where you can't hardly put cup holders in there without causing some real problems. So what's the answer? The word I got this week is if, and someday they probably will, they replace those seats, but there's nothing wrong with them right now, then they will add the cup holders. But until then, you're going to have to deal with no cup holders. Just one of the things that hold the cup in your hand. I don't know. I can do it.
I put it under your seat.
Yeah, you can reach down and grab it, pick it back up. It's not a big, terrible thing.
I do like cup holders, though. JB Carroll asks, do you think Pig Trail Nation, does he mean like Razorback Nation fans?
Yeah, he's not talking
not about us, is getting comfortable with the reality of a majority of Hog basketball players staying for one season and moving on to their next destination, while also getting excited about consistently making the second weekend of the NCAA tournament with hopes of a Final Four appearance. Kentucky fans have endured this for over a decade, though the NCAA advancement has seemed to peter out.
Boy, that's a long question. Yeah, here's the interesting thing about that. Right after, when we talked about this before, right after the season was over, everybody was down on one and dones. I don't want any more of those one and dones. That lasted until Ron Holland's name popped up. And now, what's the thing going on for the last 3 weeks? You going to heard anything about Ron Holland? What's going to happen with Ron Holland? How long is this going to go on? So here's what I'm telling you. Hog fans will never, whether they admit it or not, and sometimes in anger they act like it's not a big deal, they are never going to turn their nose up at a one and done. And that's what Holland is. He is, if he comes here, that will be 2 years in a row that Arkansas has signed the #1 high school player in the nation. That is a big deal. So put up with it. I mean, the truth is not all one and dones are the same. Ron Holland may not get injured. He may not have the problems Nick Smith Jr. had. So he could have a great year. And then he's one and done, and he had a great year, and he goes on in the NBA and has a great year, and you're going to sit here and say you don't want him? No.
But don't be an Arkansas one and done that didn't pick Arkansas. Whoo, they still mad. Poor Malik Monk. They're still mad.
That's right.
Right? So they care. All right. Slobberslog says, I hate that Quincey McAdoo is laid up like this and praying for a speedy and full recovery. That kid has a bright future.
You know, we talked last week about this, and at that point, his family had just said he was out of bed, he was walking around, he was getting better. Nothing was said about playing. And I offered my opinion at the time that I just think it's a stretch that he's going to be back in time for football season. Well, since then, Sam Pittman, I guess, has gotten an update, and he said a lot of stuff about it, but one of the things he said was he wouldn't expect him back this year. What we want him to do is just recover from this situation. And that's the main thing. If you look at the seriousness of the accident, it could have been much worse. Everybody should be thankful that he at least is going to be okay. It may take some time. We don't know about his football future. He might play next year. It's very doubtful for this year, but if he does, that's great. That's a bonus. But we just have to wait and see on him.
Just happy he's alive for sure. All right, Zelda fan 1942 says, do you think The coaching staff for our football team is still trying to recruit scholarship players for the upcoming fall, and if not, do you think anyone we already have will earn a scholarship? I'm especially concerned about this upcoming season. I really hope that is not true 3 or 4 years from now.
What he's really complaining about is the portal.
Okay.
And he's basically saying, and before the portal, here's what would happen. The way these scholarships would shake out every year, sometimes a team would end up with 1 or 2 open scholarships. Mm-hmm. They just didn't, they were holding out for a guy or two, and the last minute they went somewhere else, or they said they were coming and they didn't. And so you have a couple of scholarships, and you go look at a good guy and go, we've seen that now. The coach has a meeting, they put it on Twitter, and he's talking to the team, and then he says, and by the way, blah, blah, blah. And the guy gets up, and it's a big surprise to him, and he's getting in, everybody's slapping him on the back. That's a real nice thing to see. But with the portal, that becomes less likely. Because what coaches can do now, whatever they end up short of with their high school recruiting, and sometimes it's intentional, they can make up with the portal. And for instance, there was a time about a month and a half ago when there were a bunch of open scholarships at Arkansas, and we talked about all the fans were concerned. What are you doing? What are you doing? Well, slowly but surely they keep adding. It looks like to me, the last update that I kind of checked on, I think they still want to add 2 or 3 more people. They may get them and they may not. And I think there's maybe 3 slots left. We'd have to, if Otis was here, he could tell us. If they don't get everybody, they might have 1 or 2 of those things, and then you'll have that situation. Mm-hmm. What he's comparing this to, though, is the preferred walk-on program, I think. You're still going to have walk-ons that earn scholarships, but that's a totally different thing. This is a guy that you recruit and say, we don't have a slot for you now, but we want you, and we'll give you a scholarship. You just got to come in and put in the work, and next year, that's a totally different situation. That would be taken care of the next year, usually. That's not the thing that we're talking about now, where a guy just gets a scholarship. One has something to do with whether you win or not. The other doesn't. It's just a nice thing. I mean, how many times we've talked about walk-ons helping you win, mm-hmm. and they can. But most of the time when a guy gets a surprise scholarship, he's not the kind of player that's going to win a championship for you. That's something you do as a coach to reward a guy that's a good practice player. He might get in a game and do a few things for you. That's a totally separate thing from a preferred walk-on. So we're still going to have walk-ons that contribute. It's just different the way it happens now.
Yeah. Andrew Landry, not the golfer, says, I heard you say, or maybe the golfer, I heard you say on the radio that coaches and players in the women's sports are under less pressure than coaches in men's sports. Why is that?
Well, first of all, I think there was a misunderstanding of what I said because other people have asked me about this. I wasn't saying that, for instance, a women's softball coach or women's basketball coach doesn't put pressure on themselves or doesn't feel it, because they do. It's internal. But it also varies from coach to coach. There are men's coaches, some of them would go crazy to drive themselves nuts, putting pressure on themselves, and others don't. That's your individual personality, and that extends over to players. I've known players that would just sit around and put total pressure on themselves, and others. Look at Matt Jones. You think that guy sat around and acted like, oh, I'm under pressure. He knew how to handle it. So it's different from person to person. What I was talking about was social media pressure. Mm-hmm. Pressure from fans where you, like the deal with Michael Turner last year, where he got so mad at stuff that's on social media and stuff that's said on radio and stuff like that. And I still think, here's what I think, and I admit I haven't done a survey on it. I haven't. But I tend to think that if you polled and did a background check or whatever on people who go to women's athletic events, people who admit, I watch it on TV, I got ESPN3, I watch all these sports, I think you'd find a somewhat older crowd of people. Now, that doesn't mean they're all 75, but maybe they're a little bit older than the typical crowd for men's football, basketball, and baseball. And as such, they're more mature, and they don't tend to go nutso on you. Because what I don't...
Or they're not on social media.
And some of that is true, too. Now, Courtney and I got into a discussion about this yesterday because she said she was seeing stuff on social media about fire Courtney Deifel and all this stuff, and they screwed up, and it's bad, and blah, blah. And I'm going, I didn't see any of that. So I went to our Pig Trail Nation Facebook site. That is ground zero for some of the nuttiest stuff you will ever want to read. I'm scared to go in there sometimes during football season. I mean, I'm not kidding. I I mean, that's like walking into a horror movie sometimes. And also, all I saw were nice, positive comments. You know, it was like, you'll get them next year. Just go re-recruit, use the portal, get yourself some more pitchers, and find a hitter or two, and your freshmen will get better next year, and everything will be fine. You know, it's probably when you have 2 or 3 disappointing years like Razorback women's basketball, it amps up a little bit, but you're going to get that kind of pressure from your AD anyway. And like your AD's not just going to sit there and do nothing if you don't win in women's sports. But I was talking about the pressure from fans, and I still don't think, it obviously varies from fan to fan, but as a group, overall, I don't think you get as much of that crazy stuff, especially on social media, from like fans of women's athletics as you do sometimes men's sports. And it's probably because they've got more sense.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Final question of the day from Eddie Lynn. And he says, I saw on Twitter where you said that the biggest SEC moment for you was Matt Jones out-dueling Eli Manning in 7 overtimes in Oxford. There are a ton of great moments. That's a good one. But why is that number 1 for you?
Some of it has to do with Ole Miss, which I don't like.
Yeah.
Some of it has to do with the fact that it was at Ole Miss, which made it better. But most of it was, here's this guy that came along, this Matt Jones guy, and at that point, he had only been starting for a few games. Remember, they went almost half a season with him sitting on the bench. And he comes off and he's starting to play and he's doing these things. But in this game, it was the first time I saw what later fans began to recognize as a trait of Matt Jones was when he decided, and he had to decide this, when he decided you were not going to beat him, you were not going to beat him. It was impossible. And if you go back and look at that game, if you look at the Kentucky game later on where he was another 7 overtimes game, he just, no matter what they threw at him, he came back and had an answer. Now, he got help from his teammates, but that's because his teammates understood what he was doing. And it was just amazing to watch that happen. And the fact that it happened, I'm not a big fan of the Mannings. So here's Eli, and everybody's talking about Eli. Well, Eli, you lost. You know, you lost to Matt Jones. I still say this, I will continue to say this. If some NFL team had had the brains to draft him as a quarterback, Matt Jones could have made it as an NFL quarterback. He could have. They just didn't give him a chance. He didn't want to be a receiver. He did what he could as a receiver. It wasn't his thing. He was a quarterback. And he proved that night he was a quarterback who knew how to win, and it was the first time he did it, and he did it several other times after that, including that day in Austin when he did it again. He just said, hey, Longhorn fans, what's the big deal about, you know, we Arkansas fans can't beat you. I can beat you. Watch what I do here. Takes off running. They're going, he's not running that fast. Well, he's outrunning me, so I guess he is.
Yeah, you know what's funny? Obviously, you experienced that in real life. I moved here in 2013. In 2014, I believe, I was sitting on my couch in my apartment, and the SEC Network was playing that game, and I watched it for the very first time, and I had no idea what the outcome was. And that was really cool, because it was 2014, years later.
Wasn't it cool?
Oh, my gosh.
Do you
I was
remember?
on the edge of my seat on a game that had happened 7 years prior.
Remember when he goes around, I think, the right side, the left side of Texas defensive line, and he clears the edge and he outruns all these guys, and they're all just like, what? And as he crosses the goal line, he's got the ball in his hand, and he flips it off of the stupid Longhorn mascot dude that's supposed to be the cow. You know, the cow dude is standing there, and just bonk, goes off his chest. It's like, hey, take this. Catch this. Oh, you didn't catch it, did you?
You're funny. That is going to do it for Ask Mike. Remember, if you've got a question for him, just go over to our website, hogville.net, and ask away on the forums page. Of course, you can also hit him up on Twitter and Facebook as well. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.